Hey everybody, my name is Noel, I'm 31 years old and this is my brand new channel where I will be posting videos about life in Canada and life in Russia. And the reason why I will be doing this, because I've been living in Canada for 15 years, but for the past 4 years I've been living in Moscow. So I have a pretty good understanding of the dynamics of living in these two countries. And I think this type of content you might find interesting.
Here we go.
Before I moved to Moscow, my last place of employment in Toronto was State Farm Insurance, or Desjardins now. I've been working there for 5 years, and currently in Moscow I work for Eurochem. This is one of the global leaders in fertilizer industry, and they have a big IT department, and I'm one of the IT project managers. Point number one will be that in Canada, even though it is important that if you know somebody already working in the company, they might give you a reference, but eventually this is not deciding factor if you are going to be hired or not, because in Canada your potential employer still gives a lot of preference to your knowledge. You have to be very knowledgeable in the area that you are applying for in this position. In contrast, in Russia, a lot depends on who you know.
Who do you know?
Basically, if you are well connected with somebody within that company, and especially if that person works in HR or some sort of top manager, they are going to give you preference versus somebody that is actually more knowledgeable for this position but has less connection. So that's a pretty big difference between working in Canada and working in Russia. Second point, your manager in Canada for the most part is very knowledgeable. So in case you have any questions or not sure about certain workflow or how to do something, your manager or your immediate supervisor for the most part is the go-to guy. In contrast, in Russia, for the most part, your manager is not as knowledgeable, and I don't know why, but people are, or at least they seem to be afraid to come up to their manager and ask something that they don't know how to do. So they are going to come up with 1,000 different ways or many excuses of how to do it without letting their manager know. Maybe employees feel kind of intimidated approaching their manager because it might seem like they don't know something, which is kind of weird in my opinion, especially if you're starting a new position at a new company, because you're still getting used to how things are done within this organization, and obviously it makes sense that there are certain things that you are not familiar with at this point. So it's kind of weird, but over time I kind of got used to this. So I try not to bother my manager unless I really have to, because here it's not really a good thing when you are coming up to your manager time after time trying to figure something out. Now point number 3. In Canada, unless you're working for a very small company, like moms and pops shop type of thing, the training for your new position is very formal, very detailed. So before you start your day one, you will be trained very thoroughly, and you'll be pretty much ready for anything that comes your way. In Russia though, when you're starting a new position at a new company, there's barely any formal training. So what happens, you kind of being thrown in a deep end and you have to figure out your things on the go. It's kind of challenging, especially if you're not really allowed to approach your manager with a lot of different questions, because managers in Russia don't like to be bothered with this kind of questions. And why, I explained in the previous point. So if you're starting a new position in Russia at a company, be prepared that you have to figure out a lot of things about work processes, workflows, all that on the go. Point number 4, your job description in Canada is very detailed very broken down. You know exactly what you're going to do for the most part. In Russia, there is no job description for your position.
What the hell?
It's kind of weird because after living in Canada for 15 years, I'm so used to knowing exactly what I have to do. Every day that I come to the job, I know exactly what needs to be done. When you work for a company in Russia, even if it's a big company, I'm not even talking about smaller scale ones, even at a big company, there is no formal job description. Like obviously there is, but in reality, you might be doing or you might be responsible for a lot of other things on top of what you've been assigned to. So you don't have to be too surprised when your manager or your supervisor would approach you and tell you that you have to do this and that, even though it might be something completely off or that something that you haven't done before. It's kind of weird because, again, having this Canadian mentality where everything has to be by the book, it was strange to me, and it took me a while to get used to it. But after a certain period of time, it's not as shocking anymore because you see that everybody's doing it, kind of. My last point number 5, which is the most interesting one in my opinion. I'm going to talk about how much money people make here. I'm not going to provide any figures because a lot depends on the industry, but for the most part, people in Canada, they make more money regardless of the industry. I'm not even talking about working as a teacher, because teachers in Canada and teachers in Russia make substantially less in Russia than they do in Canada, or even being an electrician. In Canada, you might be making over $100,000 a year easily. In Russia, being an electrician means you probably pretty much fail at your life because you're making close to nothing. So it's not really a respectable job. But a good thing about working in Russia, when you just start your new position at a company, right away you get not 2 weeks of paid vacation, but 4 weeks of paid vacation. This is pretty cool. To give you an example, when I used to work at State Farm back in Toronto, I started off only with 2 weeks of paid vacation like everybody else, and only after 3 years I got my 3rd week of vacation, and my 4th week came in only after 5 years being with the company. So you see, by giving you this example, in Russia you get 4 weeks right away, but in Canada, to get your 4th week of vacation, you have to work in the company for 5 years at least. Also, there's no such thing as tax bracket in Russia. Everybody pays 13% tax, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, if you're making a lot of money, it gives you a lot of room to maneuver around because you don't have to pay as much taxes. Because in Canada, basically, the more money you make, the more money you have to pay in taxes, because you will be thrown in a different tax bracket the more money comes in your pocket. In Russia, it's flat 13% for everybody. For somebody that is making, for example, 1,000 rubles, and for somebody that is making over 1,000,000 rubles, everybody pays fixed amount of 13%. Another thing that differs a lot between Canada and Russia are the benefits. In Canada, we're so used to having family health insurance, gym membership, and other perks like that. In Russia, though, just being paid on time and not in cash but as a bank transfer is still a rare thing. I'm not really sure why. I guess employers are trying to pay less taxes to the government. Maybe that's one of the reasons, but that's beside the point. So what I'm trying to say that if you're working for a company in Russia and you get health benefits, you get gym membership, you can consider yourself being very, very lucky, because about 90% of people don't get this kind of benefits, so they just work for their salary. So these are the major points that I wanted to share about working in Canada and working in Russia. Obviously, it was just a brief description of everything. So, if in case you have any questions, feel free to message me on YouTube, leave a comment. If you like this video, make sure to sign up to my channel, because there will be a lot more coming about my experience of living here and about my previous experience of living in Canada and comparing some aspects of this. Alright guys, I hope you have a good day and I'll see you soon. Take care.